Hello class, I hope you are doing well. Today we are going to learn about Chapter 8, Section 2, Creating the Constitution. So in the last section we learned that the Articles of Confederation created a weak national government. And now we are going to learn that the Constitution created a new, stronger government that replaced the Confederation. So why was there a call for a constitutional convention in the first place? Well, fear of rebellion, such as Shays' Rebellion, which we just learned about, and lawlessness made people believe that the national government needed strengthening. Congress debated how to best keep the U.S. from falling apart, and it was decided that delegates would meet and decide how to deal with these issues, since the Articles of Confederation were not sufficient. So 12 states sent delegates to the convention held in Philadelphia. Only Rhode Island declined. There were 55 delegates. 34 of them were lawyers. The convention began in Philadelphia on May 25, 1787, and I have a picture of the State House where the Constitutional Convention was held. The president of the convention was George Washington. Everyone voted for him to be the president of the convention because he was a strong leader, yet he was soft-spoken, had a great demeanor, and so everyone voted for him to be the president of the convention. The delegates did not want to be pressured by the politics of the day, so they met in secret, and it was so hot. They closed the windows, they shut the doors. It was, they were sweating. It was so hot in there, but they wanted to keep it a secret. They didn't want people from the outside, media, talking about what was happening. It's even said that Benjamin Franklin, he was elderly at the time, he was followed by people from the convention to make sure he did not let any details slip when he was out in public. What we know about the convention is thanks to James Madison from Virginia. He took detailed notes on the proceedings, what was happening. So thanks to him, we know what happened in those closed doors. So who was there? The delegates at the Constitutional Convention, the convention where the Constitution was created, became known as the founders of the United States. You'll also hear people refer to them as our forefathers. Included was James Wilson, a delegate from Pennsylvania. He worked with James Madison in pushing for a system of popular sovereignty, which is a government system where the people rule. Who was not there? Thomas Jefferson, John Adams. Both were overseas at their diplomatic posts, so they were not at the Constitutional Convention. Patrick Henry, who had been elected as a delegate from Virginia, refused to go. He said he smelled a rot tending towards monarchy. So he was afraid that a king would be named, and we just got done fighting the Revolutionary War. He wanted nothing to do with that, so he didn't go, even though he was elected. So what were some of the major challenges facing the convention? Put yourself in the shoes of a delegate. Our first question, should we try to reform the Articles of Confederation or drop them completely and make a new constitution? And if so, how do we make a constitution where all the states agree? The states were very different in size and economies. So the founders decided to make a whole new document and dropped the idea of trying to fix the Articles of Confederation. The founders did not reinvent the wheel, but used great ideas already in circulation. What were some of these great ideas? Well, in the lesson, Influence on the Delegates, we learned about the ideas that were circulating at the time. The delegates knew that the states wanted a government that was strong enough to protect people's rights, but not so strong that it would oppress them. So, some of the challenges of the convention, one of them was the disagreements over representation. How should it be decided how many representatives each state sends to Congress to make laws? Now we have the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan. So first, the Virginia Plan was designed by James Madison and other Virginians, and the New Jersey Plan was presented by William Paterson. So let's start with the Virginia Plan. This proposed a government with 3 branches: the executive branch that would enforce the laws, judicial branch that would interpret the laws, and the legislative branch that would create the laws. This branch would have 2 sections, the upper house and a lower house. Both of these houses would be filled with representatives based on a state's population or its wealth. Each branch could check the powers of the other branches in certain circumstances, and this system of checks and balances is a way of controlling the power of the government. Well, small states strongly opposed the Virginia Plan because it gave more power to states with larger population. So in response, the New Jersey Plan was created as an alternative. The New Jersey Plan called for a single chamber Congress, and each state has an equal vote, just like in the Articles of Confederation. So I included this outline of the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan, and you'll see that the Virginia Plan gives the 4 largest states a majority in both houses of Congress, whereas the New Jersey Plan gives the 7 smallest states, which included just 25% of all Americans, control of Congress. So the Virginia Plan gives more power to the larger states, and the New Jersey Plan gives more power to the smaller states. By July 2nd, the convention was at a halt because of this dilemma. The states, they were just butting heads. They could not think of a solution. There's this large states wanted the Virginia Plan. Small states wanted the New Jersey Plan. So to try to find a resolution, the delegates assigned a member from each state to the Grand Committee dedicated to compromise. So what do you think happened? The delegates compromised and agreed on a plan proposed by Roger Sherman and the Connecticut delegation, known as the Great Compromise. It was an agreement to establish a 2-house legislature with all states having equal representation in one house, which would be the Senate, and each state having representation based on its population in the other house, which would be the House of Representatives. And that's how it still works today. So here outlined is the Great Compromise. So you'll see House of Representatives, represented determined by population, and the large states were happy with this because they could send more representatives to the House of Representatives. And the Senate, every state has an equal number of reps, so the smaller states liked this because their reps in the Senate were the same for the larger states. Every state, no matter what the size, sent the same number to the Senate. Another huge issue during this time was slavery. So how did the Constitutional Convention compromise over slavery? We're going to look at that. So Southerners regarded slaves as property, yet for political reasons, they wanted slaves to be counted as people so that the slave owners would then have more representation in Congress. But at the same time, they did not want their slaves counted for tax reasons. They didn't want to pay tax on them, but they wanted them to be counted as people so they could send more representation to Congress. Now, the Northerners knew what the Southerners were up to, and they said, no, that's not fair. You don't get more representatives based on your slave population, but you should be taxed for your slaves. So they butted heads. They compromised, again, on this issue, and it's the 3/5 compromise, an agreement that 3/5 of a state slave population would be counted for representation in the legislature and taxation. So you'll see here on the graph, there's 5 Caucasian people, and they are all counted when it comes to representation. There's 5 people, you get your reps, as well as you're going to be taxed on all 5 people. On the bottom, you have 5 African Americans, and you'll see that 2 are crossed out. It was decided that for every 5, we're not going to count 2 of them, but for 3, we'll count for representation, deciding, how many representatives you send to Congress, and you'll only be taxed on 3. So that was the 3/5 compromise. Another issue, do we outlaw slavery? Slavery had already been outlawed in several northern states, and many northerners wanted it outlawed throughout the U.S. But the southern slaveholders disagreed. They said, we need our slaves. You cannot outlaw slavery. And it got to the point where Georgia and South Carolina threatened to never accept a plan if their demands were not met. They didn't want slavery outlawed. So now what do we do? You have people who know slavery is wrong and they want it outlawed. At the same time, they want the United States to stay together. And if you have some states saying, nope, we are not going to go along with your plan if you outlaw slavery. So now what do we do? Again, they decided to compromise. And they said the slave trade could not be banned until 1808. Now, the slave trade is different from slavery. Slave trade means we're not going to be bringing in slaves from different countries, from Africa, from the Caribbean, and trading them on U.S. ground. So they said, okay, after 1808, it's not happening. Slavery was still legal, though. You could still have slaves after this point. You just couldn't be bringing them and selling them from other countries. So that's how they compromised. On September 17, 1787, the delegates passed the new Constitution. Out of the 43 delegates present, only 3 decided, nah, I don't want this, and they didn't sign it. The next step was that the Constitution had to be approved by the states. So you can look over these questions. You can pause this and read the questions. And the vocabulary. Pause it. Pause the video and please copy this vocab. And please pause the video again and copy this vocab. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure that you take the homework quiz on this section. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in class.